Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Metkler.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Brian Roach. I am here, back from vacation, back from the land of the mouse, driving 15 hours straight to get here to watch what eventually became a Steelers victory, but at various times was upsetting to my stomach and made me want to go back to Florida. But I'm not going to talk about this by myself today. I am joined by Zach Metkler, another contributor here at SCU. Zach, welcome aboard.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. I think now we can have a conversation with our heart rates a little bit lower than they previously were.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It would have been a challenging podcast had they not had the second half that they had. But to say that the Steelers, who have lost their last three games coming off of a bye, looked like they forgot they were off the bye in the first half of that game might be even selling them short, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, they've had three straight losses after bye weeks in the previous seasons, and coming into this one, and they started off the way they did. It was definitely concerning to say the least. I expected at least somewhat of a fast start based on all the excitement they'd seen the build up over the bye week, saying they had ironed out some wrinkles, but you didn't really see a whole lot of that at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, the offense looked, I don't want to say ludicrous, but they definitely looked like they just didn't know what was going on during that first half of the game. I think through the first half they had something like 53 yards. The Colts were the first ones to manage a first down in the game. You sort of expected the Colts to be somewhat less than challenging, considering this is a team that's given up more points than any other team in the league. They've given up more sacks than anybody else in the league. And at least through the first half, the Steelers were unable to get to Brissett and get him on the ground. There wasn't seemingly anything that was going their way. Ben looked out of sorts. The running game had hits and misses. The offensive line seemed shaky. And the defense was allowing Frank Gore to look, I think as somebody quoted on Twitter, like Jim Brown at times. That might be a stretch, but Gore was able to gash them for big chunks of yardage on first down, setting them up. And of course, then Artie Burns, as I quoted, got burnt like bad toast by on a 60-yard pass, and at the half, what was it, 7-3, or what? Did they manage to get that second touchdown in the first half? 10-3, wasn't it?
It was 10-3 going to halftime. Yeah.
I have a difficult time figuring this team out at times. It really does feel like they still just aren't a cohesive unit on the offensive side of the ball. We're now, 9 games in, and it should start to be getting better, shouldn't it?
I mean, you would think so. I mean, you see them in previous seasons, and they've always had these slow starts, and that's kind of an expectation at this point. But typically, the halfway point, you start seeing at least some signs of life. Like even those a couple losses they had last year, midway through the year, they showed some signs of this is going to be a team that's going to come around. We just need to sit patiently and wait for it. But they still haven't had that aha moment that makes you feel like this is a team that's the cream of the crop in the AFC, the cream of the crop in the NFL, and some point something has to give, or else they're going to end up giving their season away. I mean, they're still 7-2, but at some point, whether it's the play calling, which I don't really necessarily see an issue with all the play calling. I mean, sometimes Haley makes boneheaded decisions when it comes to what to do in certain circumstances, but for the most part during today, I know there's an instance on the goal line. I think it was 3rd and 1 from like the 7 or something along those lines. They handed off the ball to Bell. Most fans would have been upset and thrown away their TVs if they would have seen a pass there. So they did what they needed to do to move the ball. The second half, they fed Bell. He'd only had a couple carries going into the end of the game, but he still finished the game with 26. So I don't know what it's going to take to get to that point where we're sitting there seeing the offense playing at the expected level that we thought they would be doing at this point of the year. You see Bell, they fed him towards the end of the game. He was able to get the ball moving. Some of Haley's play calling is sometimes questionable, but at the end of the day, I didn't see really many faults of his during this. It was just more so execution. So I don't know what it's going to take to get to the point where we're seeing this offense finally click on all cylinders and become the team that we expected them to be at this point of the year.
Yeah, you brought up that goal line area, especially the one series where they're going for two, was, I think, probably the most frustrating thing to watch as a fan. They're in the wrong formation or they have the wrong personnel. Something isn't right. Ben calls timeout. They come back from the timeout, and it's still not right, and they end up taking a delay of game as opposed to blowing another timeout, which I guess they couldn't have taken two in a row anyway. But it's that kind of confusion that seems to be their Achilles heel this season, whether it's not that, they have so many moving pieces right now, or there's a lot of guys trying to reacquaint themselves with the unit, or whether it's just a breakdown between Haley and Ben, or Haley and the offense as a whole, or something. I just don't know. But you watch, I tweeted this out various times during the game, and I don't know whether the Steelers have become predictable to a certain extent. I don't know whether other teams are scouting them just really well. But so many different times, it feels like the defensive coordinator of whoever is on the other side must have a hack into Todd Haley's headset, because whatever play is being called, they are as aware of what it is as we are. And that is, to a certain extent, surprising to me with the amount of flexibility and weapons that they have, that they could be seen as predictable.
I think there's a couple times during the game where I was sitting there watching it, and I in my mind, I just had a gut intuition as to what was going to come next. It almost feels as if some of the deep balls that they throw, you almost expect to see that. I know the one that they threw up to Martavis Bryant, and Ben ultimately threw the pick from underthrowing it. That was kind of almost in the pace of what we've seen them do on the first drive of most of these games. You see them go, and on one of the first three plays, they're going to chuck the ball up deep and just hope that they can make a connection to kind of put a dent in the defense. So you almost see these expectations coming, and I don't know whether it's not they're predictable, if they're just really focusing on their set game plan far too much to start the game. Typically you have like a menu of plays you're going to run from the get-go whenever you start an offensive day out, and I don't know if they're just not willing to move away from that depending on game flow, or if they're just strictly sticking to that until they see what the defense is fully giving them, which that to an extent I understand. But if that's the case, we've seen this happen far too often for it to be acceptable. Something needs to change. You either need to go with the dictation of flow, whatever's going on in the game, or you need to just completely abandon that, or just expect to see these performances more often.
Yeah, I find it, and as does everyone, especially the Haley haters and the Tomlin haters, it's very frustrating to see a team that is stocked with talent underachieve pretty consistently through half of a season. One of the things, though, is, you're talking about that deep ball, the first deep ball that Ben threw to Martavis, and it was funny because just prior to throwing that, Trent Green was talking about how he had a conversation with Ben about Martavis, and he basically said, none of the stuff he said off field matters. What matters is trust, and I need to be able to trust that he's going to be where I need him to be when I need him to be there. And it felt like it was queued up perfectly, because as soon as he says that, then Ben throws the deep ball to Martavis. Martavis makes absolutely no effort to fight for the ball. Admittedly, the ball was slightly underthrown. It wasn't the best ball, and you do start to question whether Ben has lost his deep accuracy, because most of these deep balls seem to be off a little bit. But, how much of that is Martavis not being aware of the ball in flight, being aware that it's coming and trying to fight for it, and how much of it has been just being off?
You looked at it, and I know they pointed out during the game, but almost it seemed as if Martavis wasn't exactly tracking the ball the way you would expect someone like Antonio Brown or even Juju Smith-Schuster at this point would track the ball in the air. And like you pointed out, the effort was really not there, but to at least disrupt the cornerback from making the interception. Even though he did have a bad route, he kind of looked like he just slouched at the end of it. But, it's hard to say because I don't think Ben's lost his deep ball strength because, obviously he's overthrown players at points this year, but the accuracy, as you said, I think that's finally not going necessarily, but I think it's starting to be questionable because you've seen him connect on some deep balls with Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster the last 2 games. But for whatever reason, the connection he has with Martavis Bryant on those deep passes just seems to be faltering. And I don't know if it's due to all the drama because I don't really think that has anything to do with this at this point in time. You want to see at least one of those balls get connected during the game. During Martavis Bryant's earlier part of his career, you would see at least 1 or 2 of those be connected, and that would be a huge momentum shift for the offense.
Yeah.
And without those, it's hard to really get anything going in that sense.
It's interesting because, he throws that ball to Martavis. It looks, as I said, either that Martavis's route is soft or off, or he's not tracking the ball, or that Ben has underthrown him. And then later on, he throws essentially, a beautiful ball to Juju Smith-Schuster where, Pierre Desir is covering, Schuster as you couldn't cover him any better. But, Juju just takes the ball. But, that ball had to be placed exactly where it was for it to have any chance of being a completion. Exactly. And it was a beautiful pass, a beautiful catch. And so it's off. Now, I spent the better part of last week walking around the Magic Kingdom and other various worlds and looking at cartoon characters and whatnot. And after walking about 25 or 26 miles, my legs started to give out, and it kind of made me start to think, because I've been a little disconnected all week and I haven't really followed much. But, it's kind of like a pitcher in baseball that when their legs start to give or their legs aren't in shape, the ball tends to sail on them. And all year long, it's felt like Ben's been high with things. Is there any chance, do you think, that his legs are starting to give out? He's had some knee surgeries, he's had some knee injuries, he's taken hits, of course, as we know, throughout his career, and while he's been fairly well protected the last few years, he is getting older, and that damage does eventually catch up to you. And you do start to wonder if maybe that's a part of the accuracy issue, is whether his legs just aren't what they need to be.
Yeah, I think if you look at what he's able to do, he's always had such a strong body when it comes to throwing the ball down the field. But for people that don't know about the technique involved with throwing some of these passes, a lot of that strength and ability comes from being able to drive the ball off your back foot, which his footwork is still good. He's still somewhat nimble in the pocket and things of that nature. But you have to almost wonder, like you pointed out, he's taken so many hits over the years to his lower body from all the injuries, all those years where he was taking sack after sack after sack and just getting whipped to the ground, not being the young, nimble quarterback that he once was. Age catches up to you when you're a quarterback, any football player for that matter, unless, of course, you're James Harrison or Tom Brady.
Yeah.
But, you're able to see that potentially being a reason as to why the passes aren't where they need to be, because his short accuracy isn't nearly as bad as what he's been able to do in the on the long to intermediate routes. So I don't know if that's potentially an opportunity, but that's definitely a good point that we might be seeing just that regression in that sense, not necessarily in his technique or footwork, but just in the overall strength that he has in his lower body.
Yeah, it's funny, as I think maybe it was the second touchdown to Vance McDonald, where McDonald was wide open after running across the field on that route, that draw route. I can't remember what it's called, but he's pulling across the field and he's just wide open and he's jumping up and down and he's throwing his arms, and for a half second, I'm sure everybody thought, "Crap, he's overthrown him." Because McDonald has to leap up in the air and make the catch. And, it made me think again, even there, a throw that he could have probably just, floated to him, it sailed a little bit on him and got a little up. Nonetheless, he made the ball, he made the catch. It was, a much needed touchdown. And I think the first one, who did he throw the first TD to? Trying to look it up because I can't remember.
It was to Juju Smith-Schuster.
Juju, yeah. Which was a nice catch by Juju, and it was a decent throw by Ben. So, he seems to be developing some chemistry with Juju, which is good. It's getting him involved. But I do wonder what is going on. I mean, when somebody like Antonio Brown can short arm a ball the way he did in the one circumstance where it's deep, and it looked like he just saw the safety coming and went, I don't think so. Which is not Antonio Brown like. I mean, it was shocking to see that ball just kind of whiff through his hands. But you did start to wonder because they had been blanketing him with two guys the entire game, and you had to know he knew somebody was coming.
Yeah, you watch at the very end of that play where they before they threw the flag, the one DB almost looked like he thought the call was going to be on him for hitting AB after the play was over, or as the play was going on, I should say, at the end of the play, not after the play was over. I don't know if AB was just preparing for that hit because I don't think he would have gotten very far had he actually made the catch. But looking at Antonio Brown, even a lot of the passes that he's gotten from Ben, those catches, you see him extending his body either vertically or horizontally, trying to bring the pass in, whether it be alone on an island or if he has a DB tight in coverage with him. You still see Ben kind of airing the ball out a little bit to him. Antonio Brown's not a vertically gifted player. He's 5'10", 5'11", so he's not going to be able to have that necessary wingspan to make a lot of these acrobatic catches other than the fact that he's Antonio Brown. So as long as it's within a reasonable distance, he's going to make the catch.
Yeah.
But we've seen, I know Joe and I talked about it during the pregame preview. There's a play either last week or 2 weeks ago against the Lions or earlier on in the season, I can't remember which, where Jesse James was streaking down the seam wide open, and you still see Ben Roethlisberger completely just airmail the ball to him. I mean, it's hard to hit. It's hard to not hit a 6'7" target open down the center of the field with not even a guy. I think the closest defensive back into Jesse James's vicinity was approximately maybe 10 yards away. So he was wide open. So you're starting to see that a lot more when it comes to the inaccuracies and whatever that is. Like you pointed out, it's not Antonio Brown like to have the ball just go through like that. So whatever led to that, I don't know if it's on Ben still with miscommunication, but the fact that we're starting to see this more and more and more, something has to be a common denominator, and I think that's starting to point more towards Ben than anything else.
The other thing that I have been, I don't want to say noticing, but has bothered me in the passing game is the dump offs to Bell. And it's not that that's bad. I mean, that used to be a staple of the offense, right? You dump it off to Bell, and Bell would make a guy miss and, end up with 15 or 20 yards. But it feels like for the most part this season, Bell hasn't been making guys miss. And those dump-off passes have been whatever he gets for, the yardage, and then Bell's down. Boom. There was a couple times where even, Trent Green was like, wow, that's an amazing open field tackle. And I'm thinking to myself, it's really not. Bell didn't even make a move on the guy. And then another time where it felt like, he could have gotten a first down on a pass completion, but was his patience style got the better of him there, as opposed to just booking for the first down. He gets tripped up and he doesn't get it. I wonder at some of the elusivity, the evasiveness with Bell, and is it just that guys are now, geared up for him? They know he's going to be a target out of the backfield. They're spying him, and as a result, they're in position to make plays. Or is he just not being as shifty as he was in prior years?
I think it's kind of a combination of both of those. The biggest knock on Bell, if there is one, has been his speed. He's never been known as a burner. He doesn't necessarily have that breakaway speed that you see some guys in the league have when it comes to making that second level effort. He still has some of that shiftiness, I think, and you're obviously never going to take him off the field, but I think this is why you see a lot of NFL teams, even though they have a staple running back that's the unquestioned starter, they still bring in a guy on third down who has some of that breakaway open field capabilities. Now, obviously, the Steelers aren't in a position to do that when you look at their depth chart. James Conner and Terrell Watson aren't exactly burners themselves, so you're not going to have that circumstance, nor do you even want to take Bell off the field since he is still the best running back in the NFL. But to that end, I think this season more than ever, we're starting to see that doesn't have the speed. And I don't know if it's teams are adjusting to the way he plays his game, because it was this novel thing that we hadn't seen in decades before, with Bell's patience. And now teams are starting to diagnose the fact that they can at least hold him up for that 1 second and just crash the ball. They have an opportunity. He's still being productive with the ball in his hands for the most part. But at the end of the day, that speed and that elusiveness is starting to be more indicative of a player of his size. And again, just to clarify, that's not me saying Bell's a bad player. He's an all-world talent. He's still the best running back in the league. He's still your guy. You're still going to have him on the field 3 downs out of 4. So you're going to have him in the field. He's going to still be the dump-off guy. He's still going to be the one that's you're going to want to have the ball in his hands to make a big play. I mean, we saw against the Bengals that open field move he put on Drake Kirkpatrick, where he absolutely just demolished him with that nasty, nasty stiff arm. So he has the ability to manhandle players. He has the ability to put the moves on an open field to really get away from these players. But I think it's more indicative of the fact that Bell has never really had that speed. And I think he gets away with it because of his patient running style, because of his just ability to have really solid agility. But agility doesn't always translate to deep speed and breakaway speed, which, you look at a lot of the plays, he sometimes breaks the ball loose, but realistically, at the end of the day, he gets caught a lot from behind or gets brought down when you think he's going to make it all the way. There was a play earlier where he took the ball around the outside, and you're sitting there holding your breath to see if he's going to make it around the outside and get into the end zone, and he never did. He got forced out of bounds before he could ever turn the Jets on. And I think that's kind of an indicative play to the limitations, even though they're minimal, that Bell does have as a football player. And that's nothing against him. That's not me saying he's not an elite player, because he still is. But that speed is always going to be his Achilles heel, so to speak. So.
Yeah, every time I get a breakaway in Madden where I'm on a running play and I've got Bell and I break into the clear, I always worry I'm going to get caught from behind. But it doesn't in Madden. It doesn't happen. But the other offensive guy that I want to talk about is of course Juju, because not only because he's just fun to talk about, but he had a nice game again. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 97 yards, had a 44-yard long one and a TD. He is turning into a consistent weapon for them, and I like the lineup of Bell, Bryant, and Smith-Schuster in the slot. And then mixing it up and keeping Smith-Schuster out there and putting him out wide. I think he's turning into a better pick than we thought he would be. His hands are strong. He got leveled in the one where Ben, and this one I don't blame on Ben, because he had a guy coming into his face. He had to get rid of the ball because he had a free runner at him. And, it was a little high for Juju to get. And as a result, he got leveled. A lot of people were screaming about that one on Twitter when it happened. But I don't throw that one all on Ben. It was just circumstance in my mind. But, it's nice to see this young kid really developing quickly and becoming ingrained within the system. I did not expect this when they drafted him, nor did I even really expect it as the season has been wearing on. But, whether it's because of circumstance, whether it's because of lack of productivity from other guys, he's really starting to turn it on. Has become a real bright spot of the season.
It's actually interesting. Bryant McFadden pointed it out the other day on TV. I don't know if it was following the Lions game or it was during the bye week. I forget when the date was for it. But the thing that makes Juju so exciting is the fact that he's a football player. And he's a wide receiver, but he's also a football player in the sense that he's willing to do the dirty work even when the ball is not in his hands. And I think that's what makes him such a vital part to this offense and why they're so excited to get him on the field. There's a play where Antonio Brown had caught the ball and he was moving the ball downfield, and you see Juju Smith-Schuster kind of getting his way a little bit, but then you see what he's doing is he's holding off 3 other guys from even getting a hand on Antonio Brown from the pickup just a couple more yards. And that's those kind of minute details that really makes him such a great asset to this offense. But you look at the productivity as a receiver with the ball in his hands, I didn't expect to see this type of productivity this soon in his career, especially with the return of Bryant, Eli Rogers was able to do as a more involved player last season. So I truthfully thought that Smith-Schuster would start out as the number 4 and slowly maybe push Rogers as the number 3 in the slot and kind of have that role and be the rest of the season. But with all the issues, obviously, that we've seen with Martavis Bryant, that put a lot of pressure on the Juju Smith-Schuster to come out and perform well to the extent that he could. And I think he's more than shown that he's had the ability to step up to that role. It started out early. He was making huge blocks during training camp. He made some nice plays throughout some small roles during the beginning of the season. And as his roles slowly expanded, for the most part, I guess I should say, he really has surprised me. I think he surprised most people. I think when you look at all the rookie receivers this year, I think a large part of his stats being as high up as they are in the rookie ranks is due to other players like Mike Williams and Corey Davis and John Ross being injured for so long. But even if they were healthy, I still think we would see Juju Smith-Schuster being up there, if not the lead, just because of the fact that he's been such an electrifying player that has been able to be a short yardage possession receiver, but also being a guy who could potentially take the top off the defense, not even just against the Lions like we saw 2 weeks ago, but that long reception he had this week, it was a deep ball. He was able to still get a step lead on Pierre Desir. He still had the contended pass. It wasn't a perfect pass. It needed to be where it needed to be. Desir made a great play on the ball, but Juju Smith-Schuster simply manhandled it out of his hands and took over the pass, which is not something we're used to seeing from receivers that are this young at this point in their career. That's a veteran-type move. And to see him be able to contribute like that in such a fashion and be able to still have these yardage outputs that he's had now for 2 consecutive games is quite incredible for someone his age and at this point in his career.
Yeah, our own Terry Fletcher has fallen in love with Juju, and of course, in the back rooms here at SCU has talked about whether he's a candidate for Rookie of the Year. And while I still maintain, and I think you do too, that it's a stretch, if he continues, it's a possibility, especially with the unfortunate injury to Deshaun Watson, in Texas, who I think was going to run away with it if he hadn't been hurt. But now that does open up things, and he has a shot at being in that discussion, I think, at this point, even though, it's going to be predicated on whether he is able to build on what he's done so far. If he disappears for a couple games, that's going to be a different story. The difference is he's really not a focal point yet. He's a nice ancillary piece, but he's not the focus. But he's starting to become more of the focus, as we see with 7 targets today. Ben is looking to him more, which, does bode well for how things go down the road for him, I think.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, even with Martavis Bryant still coming back today, he still was able to match Antonio Brown target-wise since they both had 7 apiece. And I think that's going to be crucial for the offense because you see a lot of the times as in today, the Colts were able to go in and to an extent, for the most part, shut down Antonio Brown. And if they continue to do that, at some point, if you shut down Brown and you shut down Bell, someone needs to step up. So having a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster who's able to come up, show that he can be a reliable receiver for Ben, eventually teams are going to have to start respecting that as well. And you only have 11 guys on defense to play. You can't – if he continues to step up, Martavis Bryant finds a way to get more involved as well. And even if we see some elevated play from someone like Eli Rogers in limited snaps that he sees, that's going to be huge for the offense moving forward. So you have all these other pieces around you that aren't just players like DeMarcus Ayers and Kobe Hamilton, which no offense to them, I loved them last season, but they weren't true number 2 receivers. Having that true number 2 and number 3 receiver on your team that fits the role and fits what they need to do is only going to help your offense explode down the field and down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, let's flip over to the defense real quick before we close out this. And we'll start with the biggest negative, which of course is Joe Hayden. And as is being reported, he has a fractured fibula. And it's clearly not what you would call broken, as Terry has pointed out to us. Terry, being our medical expert, has pointed out to us many times. If he broke his fibula, he wouldn't have been trying to run on it. He would have had something more than a sleeve on it. It's fractured. Now, fractured can mean a lot of different things until we get some more information on it. We won't know whether it's a season-ending injury or just an injury that we're going to have to hope he comes back from. But that is truly an unfortunate aspect of what happened today, and probably the biggest negative to take away from this game is losing Joe Hayden for a period of time, because he has been very quietly a very stable element in the Steelers secondary this year.
Without a doubt. I mean, a lot of people doubted his ability to come in and be able to perform at the level he did because he had kind of fallen off over his last season and a half, 2 seasons or so with the Browns. A lot of that was just due to him dealing with a lot of nagging injuries that hadn't really allowed him to be able to have the impact performance that he had shown at the beginning of his career. Having him come in there and have a veteran presence, be able to take some of the pressure off of Artie Burns to need to be that shutdown guy right away. So you have 2 really reliable corners was invaluable. The reason why you saw the Steelers secondary perform as well as they had, because in my mind, a cornerback who's keeping his name out of the announcers' mouths during the game is typically doing his job correctly and doing it well. The minute we start sitting here and complaining about the performance or a deep pass that gets allowed or something along those lines, that's when you start getting concerned. And we've seen that a lot with a lot of the infamous cornerbacks the Steelers have kind of cycled through in recent years. So having a guy like him be able to perform at the level he was able to, that's going to be something that's going to be hard to replace right away. So hopefully the injury that he suffered is something that is manageable to potentially come back for a postseason run, and that truthfully makes the first round bye even more crucial, because if it is something he can come back from, that gives him an extra week before he needs to be back to play. So that's kind of something to look forward to if you can look forward to anything from this injury. Yeah,
it's I'm trying to place. I mean, obviously we talked about Artie Burns getting toasted for the first 60-yard touchdown. I can't remember who got beat on the second one. I want to say it was Cody Sensabaugh because Joe Hayden wasn't there, but I just don't remember, and I don't want to blame Cody if it's not him. Do you remember who got torched on that second pass?
I don't remember. I want to say it was Sensabaugh, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was kind of doing something similar to what Artie Burns did on the first play, where he was trying to prevent the short ball, was keeping his eyes on the quarterback, on Jacoby Brissett, and trying to prevent the short go. But then it ended up being the long ball. At that point in time, even though they're both extremely athletic cornerbacks, the damage had already been done. I want to say it was Sensabaugh, but I can't remember off the top of my head without looking back at the film.
Yeah, I mean, you can forgive Artie Burns as a second-year player. He's going to make some mistakes, but Joe Hayden protecting one side was one thing. And as you mentioned, and you put a couple tweets out with some nice film on this, Cam Sutton coming back potentially off of IR couldn't happen at a better time, because it could be an extra body that will help them, deal with losing Joe Hayden for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I think the biggest question that a lot of fans had was, Sutton was a talented player. They were excited to see what he could do, but with the emergence of Joe Hayden and Mike Hilton, there really wasn't a spot for Cam Sutton, even though he had proven to be a very versatile piece during the training camp whenever he was healthy. So I'm not saying that it's a good thing that Hayden's gone, because quite frankly, I'd rather have Hayden out there than an unproven rookie. But at the end of the day, that gives him another body. Cam, I know during an interview recently, he said that he could have came back a couple of weeks ago, that he's just kind of been going through the mental reps, doing what he can do to train and stay with the team to become the best player he can whenever he comes healthy, which with Hayden being gone now, Sensabaugh will likely get the first crack at the other boundary corner alongside Artie Burns. But the thing about Cam Sutton is he gives you that opportunity to be a versatile player and give them some opportunities. Mike Hilton's not going anywhere from the slot. I think he's more than proven his ability to be the mainstay there for as long as the team's willing to keep him. But Cam Sutton's been able to play on both sides of the field as well as in the slot in both nickel and dime packages. So you see a guy like that. He has decent ball skills, great athleticism. But the thing that's so great about him as a rookie is the fact that, and they raved about this, Carnell Lake's been lauding him for months, ever since they drafted him, is his intelligence as a defensive back. So often he'll make a mistake in practice, and then the coaches say that he never makes the same mistake twice. He goes and he learns from that. He's able to develop, and that's something what you want from a rookie cornerback, especially a guy that more than likely is going to be thrown into the lineup sooner rather than later. So he's a potential body to be able to go out there and perform. Even though we've seen limited action from him, he's still shown some flashes. But William Gay is also another guy. But what concerns me about having William Gay out there is the fact that he has shown some aging in recent years. He doesn't have that elite ability to keep up with players as he has in the past. So it makes you kind of wonder if they're going to just roll with Sensabaugh at this point in time, which you kind of saw today. If they were confident about William Gay going out there on the outside, you would have seen him bump over instead of having Sensabaugh out there. So, but having that extra body and Sutton coming back, it couldn't come at a better time. They seem to be pleased with the way that Brian Allen has also been developing as well, although he was inactive today. So they're going to have opportunities to try to kind of see where the pieces will fall. The only bad thing about it is the fact that they're working on a short week, so there's no way of knowing who will actually be the guy. But if I had to put my money on it right now, as we speak, it'll probably be Cody Sensabaugh.
Yeah, that's what I expect as well. The other injury in the secondary was Mike Mitchell. It didn't seem to be an area that they were overly concerned with, but on a short week, you'd have to assume that someone who gets carted off might have problems getting back for a Thursday night game. And that means we get more Robert Golden, who I guess was serviceable today, again, because if we follow that logic of I didn't hear his name mentioned, and that means he did a decent job. But it is a downgrade, even though there are a lot of Mike Mitchell haters. I'm not one of them. I like Mike Mitchell. Complain because he's out of position every now and then. Well, everybody's out of position every now and then. So I don't know. I didn't hear anything definitive. Did you hear anything about the Mike Mitchell injury?
No, I know he was in a boot towards the end of the game, and during the post-game interviews and whatnot, he was in a boot, but I hadn't heard anything about the severity of his injury.
Yeah, that does not bode well for him coming in next week. And again, as I said, I guess that means we're going to see more Robert Golden. The other concern for me, and I don't know whether it's truly a concern, but it does feel like when the Steelers' defensive line has played against what we assumed were going to be subpar offensive lines, it's taken them a while to get things going. The first half of this game, as I said, Frank Gore was able to run on them. They were not able to get to Brissett. It did turn around in the second half. They shut down the run. I mean, even saying that Frank Gore was able to run on me, he only managed 54 yards for the game, and I'm pretty sure almost all of that was in the first half. Beyond that, I think they only managed 71 yards totally for the game. So it's not a bad defensive performance on the run side, but they were being set up quite often in the first half with, 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, after some long gains on first down. But eventually they got things, going. Stephon Tuitt got his first sack of the year. That would have been his second sack of the year if Will Gay hadn't got called for holding on his real first sack of the year. But, Dupree got another sack and Vince Williams got another sack. TJ Watt made a lot of tackles, but I didn't see TJ as being as disruptive as he was earlier in the year. We always worry about rookies hitting that rookie wall. I know that they were commenting about that during the game and whether TJ was going to hit it, and he didn't think he was going to. But no, I'm sure no rookie thinks he's going to. We do have to have that concern. And, of course, James Harrison was not available today. He was inactive with, I think, a back injury. But I start to wonder, Cam Hayward was just stellar for the beginning of the year, but I didn't notice Cam making a huge push today. Javon Hargrave did drive a couple guys back into the backfield, but again, wasn't getting free, wasn't shedding that block to try and actually get aggressive. And one of the things that's starting to bother me is they are letting guys out of the pocket. That happened a ton with Brissett today, where the pressure was there, but the discipline in their rush lanes wasn't, and as a result, there were places for him to escape to, either to throw the ball or to run. And that also has seemed to be somewhat problematic. Is it possible, this is maybe the most ridiculous question I'm going to ask, is it possible that sometimes these guys are too athletic? Shazier gets this knock on him all the time that he because he's so fast and because he's so athletic and over pursues, he misses things. We saw it with a tackle that he whiffed on in the backfield on, I think, Marlon Mack, who then ran for a first down. But is it possible that these guys get too keyed up at the beginning of the game and just outperform themselves, so to speak, and get themselves out of position, and it takes them a while to settle down?
I think sometimes that could be a thing. I know I've made comments before to people, and including in the back room. A lot of times you're going to see a guy like Ryan Shazier overruns because, he is arguably the most athletic inside linebacker in the NFL. But you put up with it because, when he doesn't, he's playing at an all-pro level this season so far. So you kind of put up with that. Specifically, that stands out Bud Dupree and T. Watt. The two of them are both ultra-athletic outside linebackers, and that's why the Steelers have kind of switched to having guys like them because they drop them back into coverage in the flats so often. They want to have a guy that's athletic. I know a lot of people wanted to see the Steelers kind of go in another direction. I know Carl Lawson's name that pops up a lot, but he's just not athletic, and that's why they like guys like Dupree and Watt. But at the end of the day, there was a point in time today on Dupree's sack. He almost blew the sack because he over pursued to an extent and let Brissett kind of get away from him. And had it not been for the backside also crushing down there, so Brissett had nowhere to go, realistically, he could have rolled out of that and been able to move his feet and, find someplace out on the outside to at least evade the incoming tackle. I think an issue that we've seen with them that they don't have the most developed pass rushing sets yet. They're both very intelligent players. But they're still developing. They both rely on their athleticism a little too much. That makes me comfortable. But that's expected. They were both, and for Dupree's case, he didn't receive the best coaching and development whenever he was at Kentucky. T.J. Watt is just inexperienced at the position. So the two of them, I think, will come around in that sense. But something I'd really like to see them do moving forward is kind of hunker down, stop their rush, and be able to adjust to what the offensive line and what the quarterback's giving them. And I think that will help the lack of pursuit, and that will also help them remain in their contained responsibilities. I know there's a couple times over the last couple games where you see Watt kind of come upfield. He looks like he's going to get there. He misses out on getting the quarterback, but because he abandoned his containment, the quarterback's able to kind of slip up through the line, either go on the run or be able to get away in time to make a pass. So that's something that needs to change. But with the defensive line specifically, when you're looking at Hayward, Tuitt, and Hargrave, three of them are ultra strong players who are athletic for guys their size. And I don't know if offensive lines are starting to kind of figure out ways to key off on them, because the Lions and the Colts have abysmal offensive lines. There's no really other way to spin it. But when you watch these games, they look like they have upper-level lines based on what the Steelers have given them up front. And I don't know if that's just them needing to kind of settle down and get into their rhythm as the game progresses, or if it's more so just teams are finding ways to key off on them. Because the last two games, you haven't seen Javon Hargrave one-on-one on the line very often. I think teams are starting to understand the concept that you need to double team him if you want to have any sort of success, because if he's one-on-one, he's going to walk you back almost every single time. And the same thing kind of goes with Stephon Tuitt and Cam Hayward. They both kind of have impact plays where they're able to get off the line and get into the backfield and disrupt it a little bit. But they have sometimes struggled, especially earlier on in games, to kind of close down, make that play, and prevent it from developing further. And whenever you miss the tackle up front like that, the guys that are crashing down around you are forced to then make an adjustment, and you're not always guaranteed to make the play at that point in time. So that's something that has been concerning, but at the end of the day, they have the talent that I think we saw in the second half. They were able to make that adjustment, settle down into their roles on the D-line and in the front seven in general. And that's when you saw the 3 sacks against Brissett. You saw essentially the run game become non-existent by both Marlon Mack and by Frank Gore. So I think if we saw that over the entire course of a game, hopefully that would be a very encouraging sign for them, because they have the talent. We've seen them do it. It's just a matter of doing it on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing you just said, which is it'll be pretty stunning if we see them put an entire game together, because they have often had a tale of two halves where they are just absolutely dominant, like in the Chiefs game in one half, and in the other half, not as much. It does feel like we're doing a bit of a negative podcast here, but at the end of the day, we're 7-2. We still have the best record in the AFC right now, or at least tied for the best record in the AFC. We're in the number one seed spot. We're well ahead in our division. Things actually aren't as bad as it may have sound like we think it is. And as I was saying to you before we went on air, the thing of it is even these ugly games, that you get frustrated and you feel like it should be a blowout. In other seasons, they lose these games, and they are not losing them. They're finding a way to win those games. The Bears loss and the Jacksonville loss, bad losses, no question about it. And we can look at those as early season, pitfalls, but as we start to progress down the season, it won't really matter how they win a game as long as they win a game. And so, they're 7-2. Really, there's only one team with a better record in the entire NFL, and that's the Eagles at 8-1. So it's actually not that bad, really, when we think about it. They got out of there with a win in a fashion that wasn't pretty, but it's still a win. And like I said, I remember prior seasons where you would have just said, we're not going to win this game. And now you get the feeling, well, we might not look good doing it, but we'll probably win. So that's a huge difference.
That's the thing. You see a lot of these games, and they're close, they're nail biters, and yeah, it's stressful for fans, and trust me, it's stressful for them too. But as I always continue to stress on social media and to other people, I'm in the business of winning. And at the end of the day, it might not be pretty. There's a lot of things that need to improve, but the win's a win, and we're 7-2. And, sure, I think everyone would have loved to see them blow out the Colts. Is it concerning that they show some deficits that still need to be improved upon? Yeah. Take away from it is that they showed some improvements today in the red zone offense. We've been sitting here saying that they need to score touchdowns in the red zone. Up until the botched field goal at the end of the game, or towards the end of the game, they were 2 for 2 for touchdowns in the red zone today. That's something that I see as a small improvement in the right direction, And if we have the notion that so often we say that that the Steelers play down to their inferior competition, which is still a notion that I don't buy into, because everything happens the way it happens, whether we like to accept it or not. Luckily for us, the playoffs are not against inferior opponents. You're not going to see an 0-8 football team or an 0-16 football team in the playoffs. And at the end of the day, that's the important thing. When the playoffs roll around, sure, it's been quite a while since we've had a Super Bowl appearance. But at the end of the day, they're doing well against the teams they need to. I mean, look at the Chiefs game. They started out a little slow. They had some mishaps. They came out and closed out in the second half in a very strong fashion. They've done that from time to time in recent years as well. So I'm excited moving forward. If we were to win every single game the rest of this year by 1 point, that's still a win at the end of the day. And I know the argument that a lot of people point out is the fact that, well, yeah, they got the win, but this type of performance won't fly against the Patriots. And my response to that is there's no way of knowing if that will be good enough against the Patriots. Because truth be told, the Patriots have been far from a perfect team as well this year. And even though they typically have the Steelers' numbers, if it came down to a 1 point game, the Steelers got the win. That's still a win, whether it's a sloppy win to get to that point or not. So, in my mind, a win's a win, no matter how you spin it. Would I like to see them improve and do a lot better and have a really complete, full game? Certainly, everyone would. But as long as they keep winning, they can play sloppy like this every single game the rest of the season. And if that meant, 7 more wins, so be it.
Absolutely, and as we look ahead, we have a quick turnaround. The Titans this week, and then out of the last 7 games, 5 are at home. So we've only got 2 road games left against the Bengals and on Christmas in Texas, in Houston against the Texans. It is not inconceivable to look at the rest of this schedule and say the most difficult game is the one this Thursday and the one against the Patriots. And there's a real good expectation that the Steelers could run the table. They could conceivably run the table and end up, 14-2, which in theory should be good enough to get the top seed or at least a bye week, if nothing else. So, I mean, at this point, if they're 14-2, that means they've swept the table. They're already the number one seed. They're going to end up the number one seed at that point. So, it's not as dire as it may feel after watching the game that we watched today. Let's just be thankful they got out of there with a win, and hope that they can get their act together in time for Thursday night, and when they host the Titans in Pittsburgh. Zach, thanks again for joining me today. We went a little long, but there was a lot to talk about with this game. Again, just remind everybody how they can find you on social media and whatnot.
Yeah, give me a follow and see my tweets at GZSports_ZM. I'm always looking forward to interacting with all of you.
All right, that's going to wrap us up for here. It's been that kind of day. That is going to wrap this edition of the Steel City Underground up. Until next time, everybody, remember, as Patton Oswalt's ex-wife used to say, it's chaos out there. Be kind. We will talk to you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.